Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to take a look at every single black card in the set of Ixalan, a set that I'm super excited about. Of course, just a couple quick disclaimers. This is a limited only set review. It is not about constructed. These are my first impressions on the card. These are how I'm going to be approaching the cards for the next few weeks or so. My ratings might change as I get more experience. And finally, these are my opinions. I'm not doing this to tell you the correct answer. I'm doing this to spur discussion. Discussion with me, discussion amongst yourselves. Make use of that comments down below. But let's get started with the first black card. Up first is Anointed Deacon. Anointed Deacon is 4 and a black for a creature vampire cleric at common. It's a 3/3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have target vampire get +2/+0 until end of turn. It's a little bit costly at 5 mana, but it does attack as a 5/3, I guess. Otherwise, it gives another vampire, hopefully a flyy one or something, the bonus. Still, 5 mana feels like just a lot for something that is a 3/3 most of the time. Probably at the C range of playable, but not something you're going to feel too bad cutting. Up next is Argul's Blood Feast. Argul's Blood Fast, sorry. He's not feasting on blood, he's fasting from blood. Is a 1 and a black legendary enchantment at rare. It's 1 and a black, pay 2 life, draw a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, you may transform Argul's Blood Feast. Argul's Blood Fast, someday I'll figure out which word that actually is. It is fast. Becomes Temple of Aklazotz. Temple of Aklazotz is a legendary land that you can tap to add black to your mana pool, or you can tap, sacrifice a creature, and you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. I have no clue about this one, honestly. The first sentence is great. 1 and a black, 2 life, draw a card, sold. I'm doing that every chance that I possibly can. The fact that it doesn't have to be tapped to do that is real good. I can pay 4 mana and 4 life and draw 2 cards. That feels real good. The card is probably completely playable and desirable purely for that. The flip condition is a little risky. Going to 5 life isn't necessarily the best idea in a game of limited. Then, to make sure you're not just dead to a pair of lightning strikes or something, you need to sack the creatures that are likely helping to keep you alive at that precarious life total. Not sold. So far, not liking the other half of these flip cards. That won't remain that way. There are some great ones coming up. But this one, not sold. Kind of like Azcanta, I like the enchantment side way more than the flip side in limited. Luckily, this one probably, hopefully, if the game's going well, isn't going to flip nearly as much as Azcanta's going to flip. I'll probably still just pick this really highly, but not really plan on flipping it if I can help it. I've got this at a solid B. 2 mana, 2 life, draw a card. I am sold. Bishop of the Bloodstained is up next. Bishop of the Bloodstained is 3 black for a creature vampire cleric at uncommon. It's a 3/3. When Bishop of the Bloodstained enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life for each vampire you control. A 3/3 for 5, as we've already talked about, is not very good. If it pings for 1, it's still basically unplayable in my books. I'm going to need to at least bolt my opponent on the regular, I think, before I like this card, which means that you need to very seriously be in the vampires deck. I'm talking 8 or 9 vampires minimum, preferably some of the vampire token production cards that we've seen and will see later this week. At that point, this becomes pretty darn decent. Even if you're still left with just that mediocre body for the 5 mana. If you're not overflowing with vampires, you probably cut this pretty hard at a C- or even lower and just don't play it. With that threshold of vampires, though, this is much more in the C+ range. Up next is the next of the Keeper cycle, Blightkeeper. Blightkeeper is a single black mana for a creature Bat Imp at common. It's a 1/1 flyer. Pay 7 and a black, tap it, sacrifice it. Target opponent loses 4 life, and you gain 4 life. This is one of the keepers that I actually really like. Being a 1/1 flyer for 1, it outlives its usefulness pretty quickly, as 1/1 flyers usually do. But, unlike most of them, this guy actually gets some value late in the game with an 8-point life swing for that 8 mana, which is pretty serious. This is probably one of the more playable of this cycle, and I'd be fairly happy to include this in all but the most aggressive of black decks, where even a 1/1 flyer might just be okay, even if you never plan on hitting that 8 mana. I'm going to start relatively high on this at a high C, just shy of C+, but a high C. I'm honestly not trying for pirate puns here, just FYI. Blood Crazed Paladin is up next. Blood Crazed Paladin is 1 and a red for a creature vampire knight at rare. It's a 1/1 with flash. Blood Crazed Paladin enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that died this turn. This feels pretty low to me just due to the variance. You're just not reliably making this more than a 3/3 in a game of limited. And the floor of it being a 1/1 flash for 2 is just way too low for me. I'll be passing on this really reliably, I think. Brew with this and construct it all you want, but I think you avoid this in limited. I just don't see this being more than a 3/3, and even that is just kind of okay. So I'm at a D+ on this, way too high a variance and something you just can't really reliably control. Up next is Boneyard Parlay. Boneyard Parlay is 5 black for a sorcery at Mythic. Exile up to 5 target creature cards from graveyards. Any graveyard. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put all cards from the pile of your choice onto the battlefield under your control and the rest into their opponent's graveyards. At worst, you're getting the best creature in a graveyard back for 7 mana. That's if your opponent says 1 card in this pile, the rest in the other. Maybe you get another 1 or so, or maybe just 4 mediocre ones are better than the bomb. As always, these pile cards are easily the most likely to have your opponents make suboptimal plays. It does cost a boatload of mana though, so I think the speed of the format is going to determine if this is like a B- or a D-. I'm seeing a lot of high costs, so hopefully it is a slower format, which, as I've said, I desperately need. And so I'll optimistically start this at a B-, even if that mana cost does make me feel a little bit wary. Contract Killing is up next. Contract Killing is 3 black for a sorcery at common. Destroy target creature. Create 2 colorless treasure artifact tokens. 5 mana to kill something at sorcery speed is our traditional common black removal these days, and it's fine. We play it, we piss and moan about it, but we play it. Coming with a couple extra mana attached to it on turn 5 or later probably doesn't add very much to this deal though, but it's removal nonetheless, just shy of premium. B-, I'll play it when I have it, and I'll pick it high to mid-pack, and be fine with it. Doomblade's gone, guys. This is what we get. Up next, we have Costly Plunder. Costly Plunder is 1 and a black for an instant at common. As an additional cost to cast Costly Plunder, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Draw 2 cards. We saw this card before as Altar's Reap minus the artifact clause, and it was okay, though not great. It works best turning a creature that's going to die anyways in combat or due to removal into 2 cards. That's why the instant speed on this is really quite nice. And if you're generating enough treasures, this costs even less, just sacking a treasure to it. Probably a totally fine C to C+ playable if you have a lot of treasures, otherwise a C to C-. You're generally not going to feel awful or great playing this card, it just is. Up next is Lightning Heal, I mean Dark Nourishment. Dark Nourishment is 4 and a black for an instant at uncommon. Dark Nourishment deals 3 damage to target creature or player. You gain 3 life. This card used to cost 2 mana and was red and white. Anyways, Lightning Helix is significantly less good at 5 mana, but it's still probably just playable. It leaves the realm of premium first pickable burn removal and enters the realm of mid to lower tier, I guess I have a slot kind of removal. C+ish, maybe a B-, but not really any higher due to that cost. Up next is Deadeye Tormentor. Deadeye Tormentor is 2 and a black for a creature human pirate at common. He's a 2/2. He's got raid. When Deadeye Tormentor enters the battlefield, if you attacked with a creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. So it's a 2/2 for 3. And if you trigger raid, if you go through the hassle of it, which isn't that much of a hassle, your opponent discards a card. That's fine, I guess. It's very, very mid to late mid-pack pickup, and you may still cut it from some decks. It's a solid C nonetheless, but this is a far cry from Bear with an upside, so C in the middle of the road. Up next is Deadeye Tracker. Deadeye Tracker is a single black mana for a creature human pirate at rare. It's a 1/1. Pay 1 and a black, tap it, exile 2 target cards from an opponent's graveyard. Deadeye Tracker explores. Note that while exiling the 2 cards is not part of the cost, you still have to have 2 cards to target in order to put this trigger onto the stack. So this is a 1/1 for 1 that does nothing until your opponent gets some cards into the graveyard. Now I'm sure, like many people, you have images of graveyards just full of half of your opponent's library, but that doesn't happen that often. It takes some time for graveyards to fill up in limited. You're not going to do this on turn 2. You may not be able to do this on turn 5 or turn 6. When you can eventually do it, it's going to be pretty darn good. It's a great way to spend your mana to potentially pump this up or ramp yourself and or scry. But I don't know. I feel like this just isn't going to be more than a 2/2 all that often. This feels really high variance, and it feels like a great case study in best case scenario mentality. I don't think this card's that good. I'm going to put it at about a C. I'll give it a try if I see it, but I'm going to pick this real late, and I may cut it somewhat regularly. So C for Deadeye Tracker. Deathless Ancient is up next. Deathless Ancient is 4 black for a creature vampire knight at uncommon. It's a 4/4 flyer. Tap 3 untapped vampires you control. Return Deathless Agent from your graveyard to your hand. 6 mana 4/4 flyer is fine, but we've got a few different 5 mana ones kicking around. Tapping 3 vampires to get this back to hand is generally not a great deal to me, but you know, if you're flush with vampires and this does die somehow, the fact that it comes back and you already cast it once, so presumably you can cast it a second time, is a decent enough deal. That being said, I don't really feel like the vampires deck is sitting back and not doing anything, so I don't know that you want to tap 3 potential attackers just to get a 4/4 flyer back. Basically, it's only good in a board stall. So, though this is good, ultimately, I think it's just a C+. I think I'll probably play it in a lot of black decks, but I'm not taking it until mid-pack at the earliest, and I'm not going to overvalue it just because it can come back. Up next, we have some Desperate Castaways. Desperate Castaways is 1 and a black for a creature human pirate at common. They're a 2/3. Desperate Castaways can't attack unless you control an artifact, which is realistically going to be a treasure, which is unfortunate because a treasure isn't meant to stick around for too long. You're sacking those for mana to ramp you. I don't know. I mean, a 2/3 is also a set of stats that typically wants to block a little bit more than it does attack. And as far as attacks go, this is just slightly better than a bear. Ultimately, this just feels very cuttable, and I wouldn't try to include this often, if ever, if I don't need to. So pretty normal C- here. Dire Fleet Hoarder is up next. Dire Fleet Hoarder is 1 and a black for a creature human pirate at common. It's a 2/1. When Dire Fleet Hoarder dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token. A piker that gets you a treasure when it dies is fine. It's not great. I don't think I'm intentionally playing this card if I don't have to, but I'm also not feeling too bad if I do have to play it. It's a very middle-of-the-road C, probably ever so slightly better than your average piker. So C for Dire Fleet Hoarder. Up next, we have another Dire Fleet member, Dire Fleet Interloper. Dire Fleet Interloper is 3 and a black for a creature human pirate at common. She's a 2/2. She has Menace, and when Dire Fleet Interloper enters the battlefield, it explores. So, a 2/2 Menace for 4 that draws a land is not something I'm interested in. C-. A 3/3 Menace for 4 that scries. That I find nice. So again, we've got a common Explorer that I'm not fond of half of it, and the other half I like. Probably just another middle-of-the-road C, ultimately, I think. Up next is our final Dire Fleet member. This one's not a C. Dire Fleet Ravager is 3 black for a creature Orc Pirate Wizard at Mythic. It's a 4/4. It's got Menace. It's got Death Touch. And when Dire Fleet Ravager enters the battlefield, each player loses a third of his or her life rounded up. I feel like this is the first time we've ever seen a third printed on a card. 5 mana 4/4 is alright. Getting Menace makes it solid. Getting Death Touch is a little confusing because Menace creature isn't really looking to be blocking, whereas Death Touch is generally best on the block, but at least if this is double blocked, it kills both things. Weird, but fine. Not even fine. Good. The third of a life thing is really weird. We haven't really seen a third before, and it's going to be confusing for players to figure that out. I've seen players have issues figuring out half. But it's going to be a relevant chunk at basically any point in the game. When they're low on life, this is probably shocking or bolting, which is great. And when they're high on life, this could be as much as 7 damage. Very, very solid card. Totally first pickable and just a solid straight A bomb. Very happy with it, despite the mildly confusing Menace Death Touch. Dire Fleet Ravager, please just be in every one of my packs. Up next, we have a reprint, Duress. Duress is a single black mana for a sorcery at common. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Like Negate, there's basically no chance that I would ever main deck a Duress in Draft, but I might find a spot for it in Sealed. Sealed is slower, your opponents are likely playing more removal and tricks that you might want to hit, and taking longer to actually getting around to casting them. However, Duress is definitely worse than the Negate because you just have no clue if you're going to hit something. You might just miss. Negate, you will either not cast, or you will counter something. This, you will not cast, or you could cast and hit nothing, or cast and hit garbage, or maybe cast and hit something good. That's like 3 out of 4 missing. So not great, D-. I generally just would not play Duress in Draft, and even in Sealed, it's a hard sell for me in Sealed. So D- for Duress. Up next is Fathom Fleet Captain. Fathom Fleet Captain is 1 and a black for a creature human pirate at rare. He's a 2/1 with Menace, and whenever Fathom Fleet Captain attacks, if you control another non-token pirate, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, create a 2/2 black pirate creature token with Menace. This seems pretty darn powerful. At worst, it's a menacey piker, and that's basically always playable. Then it starts popping out menacey bears each time it attacks if you pay 2, which, again, mana sinks. We have mana sinks. We have tons of mana sinks in this format. Very, very solid. Not a game-ending bomb, but one of those rares that you're just real happy to see. A pick or 2 after premium removal, and later in the packs when you're black, you will snap this up like crazy. Solid B from me for Fathom Fleet Captain. Fathom Fleet Cutthroat is up next. Fathom Fleet Cutthroat is 3 and a black for a creature human pirate at common. It's a 3/3. When Fathom Fleet Cutthroat enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. This isn't easy to have happen. If you recall Hooded Assassin from Fate Reforged, it's just not easy to have an opponent walk into this. Still, like the Assassin, this is probably begrudgingly playable for its fail state of being a hill giant. Seems like a C+. Just don't expect this to always be killing something. It is a little bit tricky to set up that scenario. Grim Captain's Call is up next. Grim Captain's Call is 2 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Return a pirate card from your graveyard to your hand. Then do the same for Vampire, Dinosaur, and Merfolk. Kind of makes me wonder if in Rivals of Ixalan we'll have like zombie merfolk pirates or something, or zombie dinosaur pirates. That would be a little bit weird. But yeah, this card is weird and I don't care for it at all. It seems real mediocre. What are the odds that you're going to be getting more than 1 card with this? Feels pretty low. And even at 2 cards, we're just at Wandering Death level, or any variation of this card that we've seen recently for 3 mana. I don't see this being playable. Beware of my general bias against these cards anyways, but I've got this at a D. I'm not touching this card. Up next is Heartless Pillage. Heartless Pillage is 2 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Raid. If you attack with a creature this turn, create a colorless treasure artifact token. It's Mind Rot. It's Mind Rot with a slight bonus, and it's still just Mind Rot. Playable and sealed, not generally in draft. Very, very, very D+. This just doesn't do enough. You will have situations where you don't want to cast it because you're only hitting 1 cards or 0 cards. You'll have situations where your opponent just throws away 2 lands and it did literally nothing. There's just so many misses with Mind Rot style cards that you just don't really play them in Limited. Up next is Kite Sail Freebooter. Kite Sail Freebooter is 1 and a black for a creature human pirate at uncommon. It's a 1/2 flyer. When Kite Sail Freebooter enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. Exile that card until Kite Sail Freebooter leaves the battlefield. Forgot what that word was there for a second. Making Duress temporary and attached to a 1/2 flyer for 2? Yeah, no, not interested. This is a far cry from Brain Maggot and Tide Hollow Sculler, which did not care about the card type they were hitting. Just totally out on this. I'm unlikely to ever play it, period. F. Straight F. Up next is Lurking Chupacabra. Yeah, Chupacabras are on Ixalan. Lurking Chupacabra is 3 and a black for a creature beast horror at uncommon. It's a 2/3. Whenever a creature you control explores, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn. 4 mana 2/3 is not exactly great, so I would be cutting this from every deck that does not have a decent amount of Explore going on. If you've got, say, 4 or 5 Explore cards, then the upside on this becomes pretty solid, and it almost seems as though Black-Green, one of the color combinations without a tribe, seems to have kind of an Explore theme. The more Explorer you have, the better this gets for sure. I'd be hesitant picking this early just because it really is unplayable if you don't end up with the Explorer triggers. In an ideal world, I see these last pack 1 after taking some Explorer and pick them up. More of them in pack 2 and pack 3. Anyways, lacking the Explorer, this is extremely playable at a D+, and lots of Explorer, it's upwards of a B-. March of the Drowned is up next. March of the Drowned is a single black mana for a sorcery at common. Choose one. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 target pirate cards from your graveyard to your hand. Alright, 1 mana, now we're talking. I'll play this card for 1 mana and get 1 creature back, and if it turns out to be 2, all the better. Still at best, I'm putting this at a C. I still will cut this if I have better cards to play, but we're finally talking on a graveyard to hand card for me. Solid C for March of the Drowned. I think it's totally fine. Up next is another reprint, Mark of the Vampire. Mark of the Vampire is 3 and a black for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has lifelink. Another reprint aura, and this one is much more in the this is really weak to removal camp. Unlike the Spectral Flight functional reprint, lifelink doesn't just end the game like flying can. It can cause some stupid things to happen unanswered, sure, but it's nowhere near as impactful, and it's twice the cost as well. Ultimately, you just shouldn't be including this too often, especially with the amount of bounce that's going around. I've got this at a C-. I'll play this only if I'm desperate for a playable. Up next is Queen's Agent. Queen's Agent is 5 and a black for a creature vampire scout at common. It's a 3/3 lifelink. When Queen's Agent enters the battlefield, it explores. Again, just a way overcosted Explorer at common if you hit the land. And if you don't, you get a 4/4 lifelinker for 6, which I guess is about right. I guess we usually get 3/4s for 5. But still, just feels like way too much mana being spent on it. There's way better, way more powerful game-ending things that you can spend 6 mana on. And this is just not one of them. So I've got Queen's Agent at a C+. I'm going to cut him whenever I can. Next up is Queen's Bay Soldier. Queen's Bay Soldier is 1 and a black for a creature vampire soldier at common. It's a 2/2 with no flavor text. It's just a bear. There was a day where this would have been a guaranteed C because 2/2s for 2 were a pretty solid prototypical creature. As we've seen, bears with upsides are the normal now, and bears with nothing are actually pretty mediocre. So while this normally would have gotten a C in basically every set ever, this is more like a D+. You probably just don't play this card, unfortunately. So D+ for Queen's Bay Soldier. Up next is Raider's Wake. Raider's Wake is 3 and a black for an enchantment at uncommon. Whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. Raid! At the beginning of your end step, if you attacked with a creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. Smells like a trap to me. Sure, you think you're going to get a discard every turn if you're attacking, and tacking on a couple life loss each attack sounds good, but your opponent will run out of cards at some point, and then this becomes a literal do-nothing enchantment. In fact, on turn 4, they're already likely down to 3 or 4 cards and looking to go lower. I'll lose to it, but I don't think it's going to be correct to play it. I'm at a D- on Raider's Wake. I just do not think that it's good. Up next is Revel in Riches. Revel in Riches is 4 and a black for an enchantment at rare. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Alternate win conditions. I love them. I always love to give them a try. No, they're never really any good in limited, but I will give this a try for sure. Getting 10 treasures sounds a little ambitious, but Pack 1 Pick 1 is the place to pick this. And I will try it for sure, as I said. Obviously, you need to get a whole bunch of pirates that are making treasures on entry and on death, and preferably more repeatable treasure creation somehow in addition to killing creatures and getting treasures. I don't expect you to get to 10 too reliably, but I will try it. Realistically, it's like a build around D+, but yes, I will Pack 1 Pick 1 it the first time I see it. Up next is Ruin Raider. Ruin Raider is 2 and a black for a creature orc pirate at rare. It's a 3/2 with raid. At the beginning of your end step, if you attacked with a creature this turn, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to the card's converted mana cost. It's Bob. It's our good friend Bob, except beefier. A 3/2 for 3 is fine, if slightly below the vanilla test rate, but we're kind of used to a 3/2 for 3 nowadays. Getting to draw a card each turn is fantastic. It slightly gets around the Bob problem of killing you late in the game, though it requires you to stop attacking, which maybe isn't ideal. Still, this seems like a solid valued card. I'd first pick it in packs lacking premium removal or truly bomby bomb cards, but this just seems like a solid B to me. Up next is Ruthless Knave, another Orc Pirate. Ruthless Knave is 2 and a black for a creature Orc Pirate on common. It's another 3/2 for 3. Pay 2 and a black, sack a creature, create 2 colorless treasure artifact tokens. So again, a 3/2 for 3, which is totally fine, and a token generator, which is what you need if you're trying to pull off Revel in Riches. But if you're not trying to do that, sacking a creature just to get a mana rock, a one-time use mana rock, is a lot. Costing 3 mana to do that is not even something that you're always going to want to, hold the mana up to do it in response to removal or combat death or something. Sacking 3 treasures to draw a card is nice and all, which I believe I forgot to read when I read out this card, but you can sack 3 treasures to draw a card. It's nice and all, but I don't know. As I see it, I just don't see this doing enough unless I have constant token generation or constant treasure generation to sack to the 3 draw a card clause. In those cases, maybe we could pop this up to like a B-, but as is, I'm just going to sit it at a C+. I'll play it generally because it's a 3/2 for 3 that maybe has some utility, but I don't plan on that utility coming up without explicitly building around it. Up next is Sanctum Seeker. Sanctum Seeker is 2 black for a creature vampire knight at rare. It's a 3/4. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Sign me up. First pick build around if I've ever seen one. A 3/4 for 4 is okay, if a little bit unimpressive, but it drains each time it attacks, which makes it solid. I would play that card right then and there. Then, assuming you built around it, potentially draining for far more each attack, yeah, this is just solid. This is shades of Hellrider and beyond from way back in original Innistrad. I'm going to put this at an A- just because it really requires the more vampires to become crazy, but that doesn't look like it's going to be too hard to pull off. So I'm never not first picking Sanctum Seeker. It just looks amazing. A-. Up next is Seeker's Squire. Seeker's Squire is 1 and a black for a creature human scout at uncommon. It's a 1/2. When Seeker's Squire enters the battlefield, it explores. A 1/2 that draws a land for 2 is totally fine. Not great, but fine. A 2/3 that scries for 2? Well, that just beats even the bears with upside that we've seen recently. I like both halves of this, like many of the uncommon explorers that we've seen. Though it's still a puny little thing, so I'm not going to go any higher than a C+ on it. I'll always play it, but it is a mid-pack pick at best kind of card. Up next is a really gross-looking bug, Skittering Heartstopper. Skittering Heartstopper is a single black mana for a creature insect at common. It's a 1/2. Pay a single black mana. Skittering Heartstopper gains Death Touch until end of turn. This is just straight up solid. Getting a 1/2, sometimes Typhoid Rats, is extremely playable. Mardu Hateblade was basically this card, except it was a 1/1, and it cost a white to play it, but still you paid a black to give it Death Touch. Getting more consistent as a mono-colored card, and getting a toughness boost to completely stonewall those 1-power creatures is solid. This is a card that I will happily play every single copy of, and take right around where I would take Typhoid Rats, Ruin Rats, etc. About a C+, but a very, very, very strong C+. Up next is Skullduggery. Skullduggery is a single black mana for an instant at common. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1, and target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1. This is very similar, of course, to Subtle Strike from Kaladesh, which for some reason I thought was a lot older than Kaladesh, but nope. But Subtle Strike placed a counter on your creature for 1 more mana. It was pretty solid. Not getting that counter, though, really pushes this purely into the realm of combat trick, even though it looks like it's sort of removal. Playable X1s don't feel quite as prevalent in the set. There are a lot of X1s, but a lot of them are just cards I don't think you should be playing anyways. So I'm not sure how often this is going to hit, just as straight up removal outside of combat. In combat, it's still a fine trick, and so I wouldn't feel horrible playing it, but I'm not going to go any higher than a C on it. As well, keep in mind that you must have 2 targets for this, so if you have an empty board, you cannot kill that X1, unfortunately. So I'll start this at a C. It's not great, but it's playable if you've got a spot. Up next is Skymarch Bloodletter. Skymarch Bloodletter is 2 and a black for a creature vampire soldier at common. It's a 2/2 flyer, and when Skymarch Bloodletter enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I was honestly kind of waiting for the downside when I saw this card, and it never came. It's a 2/2 flyer for 3, which is as expected and fine, and it gives you a 2-point life swing when it comes out. Reminds me a lot of Blood Hunter Bats from M13, which did 2 points of damage for 1 more mana. Very solid creature. Play every copy. Not much higher than a mid pick, but a very strong C+. Up next is Spreading Rot. Spreading Rot is 4 and a black for a sorcery at common. Destroy target land. Its controller loses 2 life. I'd put money on it. At some point, I'll play a new player at the store who's packing a few of these, and it'll ruin my day because I will not draw the lands that I need and I will lose. It still does not mean that it's ever correct to play this card. Land destruction is just so inefficient these days that you're just wasting your time playing cards like this. 5 mana to do almost literal nothing unless your opponent is simply unlucky, which you have no control over, is just too much for too little. Stone solid F. Do not play Spreading Rot. Up next is Sword Point Diplomacy. Sword Point Diplomacy is 2 and a black for a sorcery at rare. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. For each of those cards, put that card into your hand unless any opponent, pays 3 life. Then exile the rest. Time for the quad annual Punisher cards are rarely any good discussion. Giving your opponent choice is just not something you want to be doing. Your opponent will choose the worst possible outcome for you. Respect your opponent. Don't assume they're an idiot and are just going to give you 3 bomb rares out of your deck. Don't just assume that they're going to take 9 life when they are at 9 life. They are not idiots. They will make proper choices a lot of the time. If you show 3 meaningless cards, guess what? They're yours. If you show them 3 pieces of removal, guess what? They're going to take 9 damage if they can. Or more likely, they'll let you draw the land or 2 that you show them and pay 3 life for the other meaningful card there. This is just the type of card that draws in newer players. They think about the best possible outcome, and they forget that their opponent is a real, living, intelligent human being that is actively playing this game against them. I'm going to be harsh, but I'm going to give this an F. You should not be playing this. Up next is Vanquish the Weak. Vanquish the Weak is 2 and a black for an instant at common. Destroy target creature with power 3 or less. Totally fine. Defeat, which is 2 mana to kill a 2-drop or less, or 2 power rather, it has always been relatively playable. Obviously, it was more playable in Cons because of Cons having Morph, and so there were a lot of 2/2s running around. But getting to hit slightly bigger things for only 1 more mana and at instant speed is just a good deal. It's not killing bombs, but early efficient removal is also quite good. Lower tier and not a super high pick early in the pack, but a B- that you'll be happy to pick once the super powerful cards are gone, and you'll always play it. B-. Up next is Vicious Conquistador. Vicious Conquistador is a single black mana for a creature vampire soldier at uncommon. It's a 1/2, and whenever Vicious Conquistador attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. It's a 1/2 for 1 that pings on each attack. That's totally fine. It attacks like it's a 2/2, assuming it's not being blocked. It's nice and aggressive. It plays right into the black-white vampire's plan, just fine all around. It's not a bomb by any means. You probably shouldn't be looking at this until mid-pack at the earliest, unless it's a later pack and you already know that you're playing black-white, oh my god, attack of vampires. Still, seems like a solid C+ to me. I think it's totally fine. It's a weak C+, but a C+ nonetheless. Up next is Vraska's Contempt. Vraska's Contempt is 2 black for an instant at rare. Exile target creature or planeswalker. You gain 2 life. Yeah, instant speed, unconditional removal. Planeswalker hate really doesn't matter in limited, but this is just very first pickable and 100% playable. Gaining 2 life is cool, but it may as well be flavor text. This is just solid A material. Take this every single time you see it. Play it always. Our second last card is Walk the Plank, which has a million flavor fails built into it. Walking the plank on a sea serpent, walking the plank on a pirate ship. So many flails here. Anyways, Walk the Plank is 2 black mana for a sorcery at uncommon. Destroy target non-merfolk creature. So they thought about that flavor fail, but they didn't think about the rest. Anyways, being sorcery speed hurts this, but only 2 mana is a very solid discount. A similar card was in the original Innistrad that killed non-zombie, non-werewolf, non-vampire creatures, which was arguably slightly more restrictive than this. Though with Victim of Night, you were in black, which represented half the zombies and vampires in that set. In this case, you're not in either of the merfolk colors in black, so you have an inflated chance of facing them, assuming pods, not leagues, grumble grumble. Still, this is an easy include in the main board because even the blue-green decks won't be 100% merfolk creatures. Very solid, basically premium removal. I'd first pick it in a number of packs. A- for Walk the Plank. Our final card for black is Wanted Scoundrels. It's 1 and a black for a creature, human pirate at uncommon. It's a 4/3. Good old 4/3s for 2. Don't we love them, especially when they have upsides? What's the upside attached to this one? Well, when Wanted Scoundrels dies, target opponent creates 2 colorless treasure artifact tokens. We have a 4/3 for 2 with an actual downside, guys. R&D figured it out. Unfortunately, of course, that makes me not really a big fan of this card because, well, it is a 4/3 for 2, and that can snowball out of control if your opponent doesn't kill it. When your opponent does kill it, which they will because they can just block it with a 3-power creature, double block it. Any number of combat tricks will finish this off. Any number of removal spells will finish this off. They get a pretty big bonus of 2 extra mana, which, if it happens early enough in the game, can just ruin your day. So I do not think that Wanted Scoundrels is a card that you should play. I would play this if I was very begrudgingly required to, so I would give it like a C-. I'd cut it pretty regularly. If you are being hyper-aggressive, you can maybe play this. But a hyper-aggressive deck tends to fold when your opponent gets too much mana. And this card directly helps your opponent get too much mana. So I'm going to put this at a C- to start, and I honestly think that that is maybe a little bit high. So C- to start on Wanted Scoundrels. Boy, am I glad we have a 4/3 for 2 with an actual downside. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for all the black cards in Ixalan. Let me know what cards you're really excited to see. I am super excited to play with Dire Fleet Ravager. It looks so good. And of course, I will 100% give Revel in Riches a try if I get the opportunity. Let me know what you're excited about, what you think I'm wrong about, what you agree with me about. Talk with me, talk with yourselves in the comments down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at twitch.tv/themanaleek, facebook.com/themanaleek, and patreon.com/themanaleek if you want to back the channel there, maybe sponsor a draft, work your way towards earning a Mana Leek playmat, etc. If you do like the content, click that thumbs up button. If you're new and you haven't already, click subscribe so you can know when the rest of the set reviews go up, when my pre-release recaps go up, my box openings, my weekly draft videos, top 10 lists, etc., etc., etc. Click subscribe if you haven't already. And if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow for the red set review.